Hello, I'm Will Pitts, and I'm here with Robbie Gravely, who's the voice of the Greer High School Yellow Jackets, who's been broadcasting the Jackets on WPJM AM 800 and the Yellow Jacket Sports Network for about 28 years now. How are you doing today, Mr. Gravely?
I'm good, Will. Glad to be with you.
It's good to have you here. So, what inspired you to be who you are and get into this field?
Well, I guess I kind of got the bug of listening to ball games on the radio with my dad. There didn't used to be a ton of football games on TV. You pretty much had a Saturday afternoon game of the week, and it was usually just one game. And then the NFL games on Sunday, and then, late 60s, they started Monday Night Football, but as you know now, you can usually watch a MAC game on Tuesday and Wednesday night, a power conference game on Thursday and Friday night, and of course it's wall-to-wall with game day through 2 in the morning for West Coast games. And so there was not a lot of choices, and what it came down to was a lot of games on the radio. And I can remember being a little boy riding in the car with my dad, and he would find LSU games on the radio, and we would listen to their play-by-play guy. Locally, I always loved to listen to Jim Phillips, who was the voice of the Tigers, and Bob Fulton, who was the voice of the Gamecocks. And both of those guys were tremendous at what they did, and they were well respected, or even around the nation. I can remember hearing Jim Phillips talking about, "Here come the Tigers down the hill," and he would get so excited. I can even remember certain play-by-play calls. There was a kid named Rex Varn who intercepted a pass against Maryland, or check that, I believe it was NC State, and Rex returned it for a touchdown. If you want me to, I could do the whole play-by-play call of that a touchdown return. But again, I know you're a South Carolina fan, and I can remember Bob Fulton, who was the grand voice of the Gamecocks. What a beautiful voice he had, and strong, deep voice. And South Carolina, he would get so excited about some of their calls and plays, but in a very different way than Jim Phillips did. He was more reserved and deeper, and but two great, well-respected guys. And I can remember Larry Munson, who was the play-by-play caller for Georgia. He would talk like this about those dogs. He'd say it's 3rd and 1,000 miles to go. and just some of those personalities, and to hear them broadcast. And a lot of those times with my dad. And I can remember just wanting to do that. I can remember with my dad and my granddad listening to Atlanta Braves broadcasts on the radio. And, probably from ages of somewhere in my 20s and on, you could watch just about every Braves game on TV. But prior to that, all you had was the radio. I remember listening to Hank Aaron hit home runs in the mid-'60s when he was nowhere near breaking Babe Ruth's home run record, and listening to Milo Hamilton. And you may have remembered Ernie Johnson, the broadcaster. Well, Ernie was Milo Hamilton's color commentator. He didn't do play-by-play, but I can remember those two, and they would hit a foul ball back toward the press box, and Milo would say, "Get the net, Ernie." Ernie had a net, and he would try to catch those balls. But hearing those personalities, being with my dad, and just the fondness of those times always made me want to listen. And my dad, he was a college basketball player. He played college basketball at Spartanburg Junior College, which is now Spartanburg Methodist. And then he went to Wofford and practiced with them, but he had an older son, my brother, and then I came along, and it was very difficult to work full-time, go to college, have 2 little boys, and play college sports. So he didn't play for Wofford very long because he had to focus on his family. But he was a recreation director. He was a great baseball player, signed a contract with the St. Louis Cardinals. He taught himself how to play golf and became a scratch golfer. So sports was just always a big part of my life growing up. And as you know, I've been involved in sports with my son and my daughter's lives, coaching their teams. And so always sports has been there. And my, watching and viewing pleasure and listening to ball games, it just kind of became natural that I would get involved in something like this. Now, the way we got started doing the Greer games on the radio 28 years ago, actually in 1989, a friend of mine who is the basketball coach at North Greenville University, Chad Lister, Chad and I would go to Greer High football games, and there was no radio broadcast. And Chad would constantly, every single game, he would say, "We need to do those games on the radio." And I would look at Chad and say, "They're not going to let us do those games on the radio, Chad. Neither one of us have any radio experience. Neither one of us ever done anything like that." So Chad would actually pull out a tape recorder and pretend like he was broadcasting games on the radio. And occasionally he would put the mic in front of me, and just to play along, I would say stuff on there. And sometimes we'd go back and listen, and I thought, that sounds pretty good. We could really do that. So he starts bugging me the 1990 Greer season. "Call that radio station. Tell them we're doing those games on the radio." Well, we got about halfway through the season. I finally called the radio station. This gentleman named Fred Jenkins, who was the general manager of the station, answered the phone. And I literally talked for 10 minutes before I let him say anything. I told him we wanted to do the games on the radio. We would do it for free. We would have a sideline announcer. We would have a pregame show, statistics, a postgame show. I laid it all out. And after he listened to me, he said, "You say you'll do it for free?" So that was the key word. And I said, "Yes, sir, we'll do it for free." He said, "Okay, can you start this Friday night?" And so, yes, we did. We started midway through the 1990 season. Greer was playing at Burns. Greer killed Burns that night, 34-7. And the Yellow Jacket Sports Network begun. We had terrible equipment. I mean, it was really crazy how poor the equipment was. When I went by the radio station to pick it up, we had the equivalent of an old homemade shoebox that had a handle on the top of it. It had like a little screen door latch on it that you opened it up and looked down into the box. Look down in that box right there. Mm-hmm. It's just a bunch of wires. All it was a bunch of wires down in the bottom of that box. And I'm like, okay, how do we get on the radio with this? Well, it had a hole in the side of it that you clipped a phone line into it, okay? And you had a phone, the wire went into the phone, you had the phone, and then the wire went from the phone into that box. So you would pick it up and hear the dial tone from the wall. Then we would dial the phone, where it, not a push button phone, but a rotary dialing phone. We get the radio station on the phone, and he'd say, "Are you ready?" Oh, and by the way, there was a microphone coming out of the other side of that box. So, "Yes, sir, we're ready." And we'd lay the phone down, and we had a microphone, and we start talking through that, and it went through the phone. Now, since there were two of us in the booth, the one that was doing play-by-play got the microphone, and the one that was doing the color commentator, he had to talk on the phone. So we're sitting up there, so we always battled over who got the microphone and who got the phone. But both of them worked equally as well. But there was a problem there. We had a sideline guy. How's he going to get into that box? So we rigged up a cordless telephone that plugged into there. He would listen to the radio station on the headset, and when we would call to him down, he would hear us over the radio, flip his cordless phone on and talk, and it came up into there. And it worked most of the time, but not every time. But that's kind of how we got started. 28 years later, we've got nice equipment now. We've got internet capabilities. We've got lots of different ways that we broadcast the game now. But that's how we got started 28 years ago.
That's good to hear. It's an amazing backstory. You mentioned some challenges you had along the way. What are some challenges that you've had to overcome in the past few years?
Well, the biggest thing we had to do was get some decent equipment. We got a mixer. We've got all nice microphones. We've got a $1,000 wireless microphone that our guy uses. The radio station pretty much just covers a 20-mile radius around Greer. So when we're broadcasting, say, in Union, which is a good ways away, the radio station doesn't go that far. So the sideline announcer needs to be able to hear us. So we had to purchase an FM transmitter. It's a short-range transmitter because the Federal Communications Commission doesn't want you broadcasting a long way on a non-approved radio station. Mm-hmm. So you can have a limited range with those FM broadcasts, but we program that thing to only to get onto an open FM frequency, and he just tunes a headset to whichever frequency we're broadcasting on, and he can hear us when we're talking and then talk back into our mixer. As a byproduct of that, any of our fans who go to Union or wherever that is, they can tune in and listen to that broadcast as well. We started doing that in the mid-90s, and actually a lot of college broadcasts do that as well. I'm thinking the company that we bought that transmitter from must have used that as advertising to tell other stations that they can do that. So in a way, we may have been pioneers on that, allowing their broadcast for the fans to be able to hear when they're away from home.
That's good. So it's Friday afternoon, Greer football at Dooley Field. Take us through your daily routine going into game day. Well,
it actually starts on Thursday night. I do some pulling off highlights from the previous week's games, mm-hmm. and getting them online to where, I'll say something like the opening drive started and Greer moved down to the 12-yard line, and then we're able to hit a button and the play-by-play call of that touchdown goes on there. So I get all those plays lined up, or at least the ones that we want to use on Thursday nights. We also make sure all our commercials are stacked and ready to go in little bunches, whether we're playing 4 of them on the pregame show or just one after a touchdown, or usually we play 2 or 3 in a row at halftime and postgame. So we've got pregame, halftime, and postgame show, and then in-game commercial spots ready and lined up to use as we need them to do. My other guy, well, first of all, I also memorize the names and numbers of the key players of the other mm-hmm. team. Like, you want to know who the quarterback is and what number he is. You want to know a couple of running backs. You want to know their wide receivers, maybe their kicker, their punter. When you see number 14 run out there, you want to know it's Will Pitts. You don't want to be having to look down. The rest of the players, if I've got a numerical roster where it starts with 1 and goes up to 99, I pretty much can call the play-by-play and look down at that roster while the play's going on and pick up the kid's name and number. You might think I know who it was, but if it's somebody that I didn't memorize going in, generally I can find them. But you want to pretty much know who those quarterbacks, receivers, and running backs are mm-hmm. without having to look up and down. But I get ready for the, that sort of preparation, get everything in order, know a little bit about the team, and then I want to make sure all my equipment, sometimes when we're packing up on the previous Friday night, it just kind of gets thrown in the box. And before I leave to go to the stadium, I want to make sure everything's in working order and ready to go and ready to set back up when we get up there.
All right, it's good to hear. So what advice would you give to someone looking into your field? Like, say if I wanted to come in and study what you do on Friday nights, what advice would you give me?
Well, first of all, you can't have Greer because that's mine.
All right.
But if you were looking to be a part of a radio broadcast, if you were looking to do something local, you know, you would want to find out some teams that don't have their games on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things now that would be really important, would it be a school that would be able to point you into some of the advertisers, because, you know, the radio station has airtime that they need to sell, and while they might be willing to let you broadcast on their radio station, they want to know that you could bring in some money. Unfortunately, when it comes to broadcasting, money is a real big part of it. Right now we have about 23 sponsors, and we bring in, you know, a good deal of money to that radio station over the course of the season. So would it be a school that would have access to people that would want to sponsor their games? So for example, if you wanted to get in East Coast Junior High School and broadcast their games, well, you would go to their coach and athletic director and ask them, hey, would you be open to us broadcasting your games on the radio? And most of them would say, well, sure, because it gives them a lot of real good publicity. Then you got to find a radio station that would be willing to let you do it. But before you did that, you'd want to make sure that you had at least 10 or 12 sponsors lined up that would say, okay, let's do this. So, you know, if you could get a radio station that would allow you to do it, and a school that was open to you broadcasting their games, that's probably 80% of the work right there. And then once you get those lined up, now, you know, one of the things that really helped us, even though it sounds like a cool little story, is pretending to broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you got a tape recorder and you can sit and watch a game on television, just sit there and pretend like you're broadcasting that game. We have a mutual friend, Casey Paris, that used to do that. Unfortunately, Casey never could get a job broadcasting games on the radio, but he would pretend and broadcast, and actually sounded pretty good on his tape recorded broadcast. But you got to be able to do it. But I tell you what, I remember that first night back in 1990, how scared I was going on the broadcast. And the first 2 or 3 plays that I called, I thought, man, it's only 3 plays and I'm already out of breath. How am I going to do this all night long? But that first touchdown play that went down the field for a touchdown, inside I'm just doing like this, like yes, because I knew once I called that first touchdown that I could do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, you either can do it or you can. And after that first touchdown, I knew I could do it. And then, you know, the other thing that helped is when the next Wednesday, when the Greer newspaper came out, someone had taken the time to write a letter to the newspaper bragging on Chad and I how well we did broadcasting that game. And it, although it was just a letter in the newspaper from one man in town, it made us feel really good about what we'd accomplished. But, you know, I would say practice when you're watching a game, and then find out if it's something that you enjoy. You know, Chad and I are good friends to this day. And, you know, I had a good friend to start with. You know, play around with a friend and figure out if it's something that you think you would enjoy doing. And if so, just go for it.
And that's awesome to hear. Well, thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this interview. And you heard it here first, folks. Yellow Jacket Sports Network, Robbie Gravely. Thank you.